Hi, it's a Citical Portal here, aka Connor, because that's my real name. I apologize that I haven't uploaded in a while. I think sometimes I get these spurts of like inspiration or some shit, and then I decide I want to upload because I have like a relatively good idea. Last month I uploaded literally a few videos, and I think to my end's fault. I sometimes have this pressure that I need to consistently upload, but then other times I don't. But that's a pretty common YouTube experience type of thing, and I don't really blame people for doing, whatever works for them and potentially what doesn't. Today might be a good video to make, so, I just figured this is probably one of the most controversial videos I've ever made because I'm not really an existentialist on my channel. I'd say in general, I'm pretty wide in my thinking and pretty existentialist in my thinking, but not actively on my channel. But I think it's a large part of who I am, and just the way that I do things is think in this very abstract way. So I feel it's appropriate for me to reveal that more on my channel. Essentially, yes, I am a gaming channel. I'm not particularly a philosophy driven channel, but since ideas are very personal and a huge part of, what makes us who we are, I don't think it's counterintuitive for me to describe that at all. I think we could start with the fact, when I was younger, things were just kind of, what most people go through, especially in this time period that we're in. I grew up very, very Baptist, very, very conservative. And, it was interesting because I had a family that was pretty fragmented and came from a lot of different roots. On one side of my family was, evangelical. That part of my family grew up with those beliefs. And on my other side of my family was pretty independent, academic, critically introspective, and followed a lot in the fields of like logic and all that, and university. It's interesting those two things converged. I mean, my family, my family lineage, it's like there's people that have divorced and separated. I honestly have no idea why they even were with each other to begin with. I mean, I'm kind of grateful. Otherwise, I wouldn't even, exist. It's fascinating, isn't it? Like people that seem contradictory to each other. Well, actually, also both sides of my family were in the military. I wanted to be in the military, but I unfortunately couldn't. I don't think I would right now, especially in the state of the United States as it is. But I couldn't just because I have certain disabilities I probably shouldn't talk about. But yeah, I think there's a lot of just interesting things I was raised upon. And I went to church like basically every single week of my childhood. I mean, there were, of course, exceptions, but I mean, every single week I went to Bible Baptist's church, a very specific church I went to, and I didn't really feel connected with the people there. I mean, they're definitely nice people, and they're people to have a conversation with, and you know, be able to get along with in most situations. But I had insane level of cognitive dissonance when I got older. I just couldn't stay in that position. But at a certain point too, I was, as a little kid, I mean, obviously you're going to believe the things that you're told. Even when I was at a younger age, I wasn't really totally buying it on the subconscious level. Oh, humans can go to heaven, but dogs can't, cats can't, because I'm like, hey, to my family, I'm like, hey, can the cat go to heaven because my cat died? Well, maybe, sure. I've heard no's and yeses, and like, it just doesn't really add up. By the way, my point isn't to change people's mind. It's not even necessarily to confess of anything. My personal experience with all those things. But I think a huge part of it too is I just was introduced to a strict set of beliefs and circumstances, and obviously very personal to people. And I'd say the controversial part is because of my channel being a relatively neutral channel and not talking about any sort of political, religious, or any deep sort of views. Me talking about this, I feel like, is a significant risk because it is very personal for a lot of people. And I still have respect for Christianity on many levels, even though I don't identify as one anymore. I still do. There's a fascinating history behind it we can talk about. I would definitely say I still have a respect for it. And I think in a metaphorical sense, I still have this sense, in a non-literal sense, God is a thing. But I think the way that we try to understand God is very anthropomorphized in its description. It's very visually human. We describe him in the way that we describe ourselves because it's of our own perspective. So we project our own perspectives onto our interpretations of God. Now, I think God itself is a very fascinating concept, but I think the way that we try to understand it doesn't really make sense to me because we anthropomorphize God, like I said. It doesn't really have any deeper inquiry. This is how we portray a character, basically, and it doesn't say anything else. For a while of my life afterwards, I would say around maybe tween years, 12 years old, I kind of started to identify atheist a bit, but it wasn't in the sense I wasn't up to the possibilities. I definitely would say on how I saw things at that point and how I was really into like astronomy, because astronomy was like my whole thing at the time. Based on what I've seen, how complex and intricate the universe is, from the extreme scales, from general relativity, where shit just gets so vastly strange and complicated, I couldn't accept to myself what we described of the past was really relevant to our evolving perspective of the world. It doesn't say that those ancient truths aren't true. I mean, be good to your neighbors, treat others how you want to be treated. That's all good stuff. There's nothing bad about life lessons, and all of these, as the point of the video, are intrinsically Taoist. Not Taoist in itself, but the encapsulation of every other idea could be within the framework of Taoism. So yes, for a while I identified as an atheist. I don't think I say I identify, because you don't identify as those things. You just your shifting of reality changes. Atheism in a sense is more like the lack of belief, obviously, because it's called atheism. And I don't think atheism really resonated with me at a certain point because it works on the logical level, being able to describe physical phenomena, physical properties, theoretical properties, even like things that we don't know for sure, but evidence supports that we know that these things exist. Like black holes, for example. Well, actually, we do have an image or images of black holes now. For the longest time, we didn't, purely conceptual. But now that we do have images of black holes, we know that they do exist. Atheism thrives in the sense it's very strong within logic, it's very strong within science, and being able to describe the world as it is. And in that sense, it's very successful. And I think in that way, it has helped propel society in a way that has moved us forward. Older limitations of thinking would have not allowed us to do. Because if you frame something as an absolute truth, then to question it is obviously heresy. Because logic and science in itself is about adaptation, evolution, well, evolution, pun intended, but evolution of thought. It has no boundaries, and it consistently evolves itself to a greater state. It's a never-ending process. In the modern framework we've created, moved away from older thoughts of thinking, which I still think Christianity is still very relevant and in some ways very important, but we seek new ways to understand the world older religions couldn't provide for us. Islam, Christianity, Judaism, a lot of the Abrahamic religions. So I think we find new alternative ways to understand the world through empirical evidence-based reasoning, through science. Aaron Ra, I watched a lot of his channel. He said whatever is given without evidence can be dismissed without evidence, something like that. And that's kind of true. But I think in the context of what I'm talking about is purpose of evidence-based reasoning is everything is based on evidence, logic, and being able to testably verify facts and data. And then if those can be tested and verifiable, then that's the truth, is the standard within modern academia. Although I think there's a pitfall in the sense modern society, we delve into other forms of this new understanding of reality, like through ideologies and ways to explore the world, such as in political ideologies, which they're a belief, but it's more of like a set of values that is a belief, but not really a scriptural sense or ritualistic sense. It's more of a set of values pertain to a single person or an entire group of people. And so you're seeing a lot of that, especially within, how we frame governments and human thought. And then you have existentialists that reach this intellectual roadblock where people get into nihilism, which I think is an insanely toxic way to see the world. Even unintentionally, I got to that when I was an atheist. It's like, well, if the world has no meaning and nothing truly matters, and everything, if we just die for nothing to happen, then what's the point of everything? And obviously, you can see why I found that is a very terrible way of looking at the world, because it's incredibly limiting. I think we dismiss a lot of modern thought as nonsense, philosophy as just fantasy, and it's just like, why do ideas that we talk about thousands of years ago, the concept of atoms, for example, we had no idea atoms existed, but then we came up with who's the philosopher that came up with atoms? Yeah, Democritus. I'm going to just read it off a Gemini prompt. The concept of atoms as an indivisible particle making up all matter was first proposed by the Greek philosopher Democritus around 400 BCE, who called them atomos, meaning indivisible, which kind of makes sense. He theorized that all things were composed of small indivisible bits of atoms. I guess he was also proposing that everything was made out of small bits, or like bricks, not literally bricks, building blocks of reality. And obviously the idea evolved. It wasn't literally made out of building blocks of reality, but that concept in itself was something that stuck with us much later on and remained true. Or Leonardo da Vinci coming up with the tank, the idea of a battling vessel that shoots ammunition out of it through a thick shield, or the idea of planes and because there was no flying objects, or AI before there was, or the idea of a computer becoming self-aware. And now we're actually experimenting with AI, even if it's not self-aware. It's fascinating to me because it's like we understand patterns of reality before they happen. And that in itself isn't logical, at least in the sense of how we understand logic. At a certain point, I shifted to Taoism because I don't think that it's like this ultimate answer to reality, rather a gradual expansion of what I already understand of the world. It's not something necessarily conflicts or contracts from it. When we die is an end, but like maybe in the non-literal sense, all religions are right in their own way, because with Christianity, it teaches values, treat others how you want to be treated, the teachings of Jesus Christ. It's all give to the poor. It's all good stuff, and every religion teaches those truths. But all of those exist within the expansive framework of how everything, understanding Taoism doesn't conflict with science itself. It actually kind of does the opposite. It says that there is an underlying structure to all things, and everything does have a framework that flows with it. And the concept of the Tao is it's basically everything. Like it's everything that is in nature, everything that can exist, everything balances itself within a duality, like including existence and non-existence itself. The phases of day and night, or even the binary of a computer. Like everything from one single state, all things can exist. And when you have a binary, infinite complexity can exist. Sort of like the yin yang symbol. That's just intuitively true. That's not me believing it to be true. That's just intuitively true. So when I saw this framework, it sort of permissed me to be able to understand I can still look at philosophy and understand underlying patterns of reality, but not necessarily have to conflict ideas with things that we haven't discovered yet with ideas. In fact, a lot of the greatest ideas and a lot of the greatest inventions, if you think about Albert Einstein, for example, when he imagined or was creating his idea, general relativity, when he thought of light, was literally envisioning riding a beam of light, which was his imagination. And he said, as a part of imagination is more important than knowledge or intellect, something like that. And I'd say in a sense that's true, because all things come from thinking about something and then creating it. And obviously ideas over time have to be refined, but that doesn't necessarily make them wrong. I think an idea is only wrong when it can't be grounded in any sort of truth. And the truth is stable, is always persistent. It doesn't change. It's something that stays within the framework of everything, no matter how much you manipulate it, no matter how much you try to manipulate your own understanding of things. The truth always lies. Wow, the truth always lies. Sounds incredibly counterintuitive and just ridiculous what I just said. The truth lies bare is what I meant. I think it's more of like just observing reality for what it is, looking at those ideas and coming back to them and realizing, there's a lot to this. Like, I remember there was a friend I had that was very scared of dying. And obviously I'm not religious in the traditional sense, but they were telling me I'm terrified of dying. And I said, why? And I said, because what happens, like, I don't know what's going to happen. It's like, of course you don't know what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to happen. If we're honest with ourselves, nobody knows that answer. But I said it in a way that was very unexpected, because if I'm looking at the framework of life and death through Taoism, a cycle of death and life being one thing, and that we constantly go in and out of that cycle, and constantly reemerge, reform, and become something new. Never the same, but something new each time, constantly evolving, never ending. In a sense, well, if I'm looking at that in the literal sense, it's like that's kind of true because we're all made out of the same material reality as each other. We're all made out of the same atoms, the same matter. I'm a specific arrangement of it. You, as the viewer watching, is also a specific arrangement of matter. And we may be different interpretations, or not interpretations, but iterations of the same matter, perceiving and experiencing the universe. But in a way, it's like the universe experiencing itself, in a way, understanding itself. When I see it in that framework, it just kind of makes sense to me because it's not necessarily saying anything. It's not necessarily denying the fact there is things that we just don't know about reality. And I don't think it tries to seek or explain it. And I think there's also another idea within Taoism. The true Tao cannot be explained within words. And that's true because you can't describe all of reality within language. But I think it sort of makes sense too if reincarnation, non-literal vessel of different points in which the universe is experiencing itself, it kind of makes sense because in ethics, because it's like if you hurt another person, you're literally hurting yourself. Not wishing for other things, the things that other people have, is kind of irrelevant because you can have literally every single thing in every life imaginable because you're always wanting something that you don't have, but the only life that you do have is your own. And I really think science itself could benefit from an integration or a symbiosis of intuition and this deeper sense of knowing, right? And I don't think knowing comes from, like, I don't want to believe in anything. I don't have belief in anything. I don't want to feel things because I want to believe in them. All I care about is truth. And the truth leads me to ideas that I think sometimes seem paradoxical. But I think in embracing paradox, we realize there are things logic itself just simply cannot explain. But logic serves its purpose. When we go to the more subjective experience of life, logic doesn't necessarily explain those things. It's created from the vast complexity. Like, I think that's what subjective experience is. It's like dense objectivity where you have multiple truths and falses that create this vastness. Ultimately, the experience in itself is the integration of both the sense of exploration and this deeper sense of intuition. As a matter of fact, I should probably define what intuition even means because it's such a nebulous term. Intuition is the ability to know or understand something without conscious reasoning. It's often described as a gut feeling or a sixth sense. Intuition can provide early warnings, such as a gut feeling. It can help us respond instantly with confidence. That, I guess it's kind of what I'm saying. This feeling of just knowing something, sort of like how the Greeks knew what an atom was, and then we discovered it 2,500 years later. That's not logical in itself, but it creates the framework of logic. I don't think Taoism claims that it is true. I think it observes. And that's the difference, right? It doesn't say it's any better than any other belief system. It doesn't say people should believe it. It doesn't demand people to subscribe to any sort of way of thinking. It simply is. This is observation, and if we metaphorically compare it to ideas, or I don't like the word design because it implies artificiality and some physical sentience created it. I was talking about God earlier. I sort of have that pantheism view of God
that kind of makes sense, because it's, if you think of God not as a literal physical being, but as all of the entire universe and all individual perspectives of it. And this is purely philosophic. I'm not saying this out of any bigger reasoning, but doesn't it kind of make sense? Every single being, collective consciousness throughout all of time and space would kind of be this God, because if God is all knowing, right? As the Bible says, wouldn't every single thing that's ever existed in a way be all knowing? And all experiencing, all encompassing. Because if you have infinite experiences, in theory, if the universe is an infinite in size, then you could, in theory, have infinite amounts of experiences in all shapes, sizes, and forms. So I think in that sense, you could see it as the material reality, but also the individual. And if we think of consciousness as this potential idea where like our brain doesn't necessarily generate consciousness, but tunes into like very abstract, small forms of information within the universe we have yet to discover or explain through modern technology. I think that that's plausible in that sense, even if we don't have the instruments to quantify it. But I don't claim anything. I don't claim these to be true. This is my personal experience, and I think it's an important distinction, because I don't believe in telling people what to do. I think people need to come to their own conclusions about reality, which is obviously very important, and it just feels intellectually wrong and dishonest for me to do that. So, I guess I hope this video was helpful for people to understand my perspective on things. And there's a lot of things that I wanted to say, but I didn't necessarily get all of those facts together. I think I only articulated my ideas very well because it was something that I've just been thinking about all night. And it's probably going to be a bit of a lengthy video, because the raw footage is about 40 minutes. In terms of gaming content, I'll definitely go back to it. I have an amazing editor, Cullen. He's great, and I'm really happy to have him around. But I think just having this one video for me to just breathe and talk about something feels really important to me. I hope you guys enjoyed it. My goal wasn't to like piss anyone off. At the same time, I kind of realized I can't control what people think, so uh yeah, I mean, I guess I'll see you guys in the next video. All right, see ya. See ya.